to our Codex group meeting. This is, I think, the only meeting we have this summer. So normally we meet during the year we meet every week, but in the summer we've dramatically slowed down schedule. But we have three fantastic presentations lined up for you all today. We have first of all, I should ask, do folks online hear me?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, super. Thank you. So we have Sachin Malhan, the CEO and co-founder of HumLab, speak. Then we have Jim Beckett, CEO of Qualmet, and Jack Su, founder and CEO of PatentPal, present. And Jack's here, and Sachin and James are presenting remotely. Before we get started with the presentations, I wanted to see if anyone had any updates or any news to share. Nothing new to report?
World University and School is looking to accredit with the state of California, which may involve a state of California Bureau of Private Post-Secondary Education engaging Creative Commons law. So that's
super
to Stanford Codex law in some ways, and Larry Lessig's being here as well at Stanford Law a while ago.
Yeah, congratulations. Great. Okay, well, then who's speaking first? Maybe
Sachin.
Sachin.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe Sachin, we'll turn it over to you. And I have to apologize because I have to actually unexpectedly have to run to a doctor's visit, so I have to dash out a little bit early, but I will see all the other presentations online then. My apologies for that. But Sachin, over to you.
Thank you. And it's a very dangerous thing to ask entrepreneurs whether they have anything new to report. Because frankly, it's not a paucity of information. It's more like, okay, what do we report here?
Where to start? Exactly. Yeah, all right, maybe I won't ask that anymore.
No, you should. But hi, everyone, and good afternoon, and it's great to be here. I guess I'm not just remote, I'm very remote. I'm in Bangalore right now. It's a wonderful, wet and cool night. And but it's great. I split my time between Washington, D.C., where I was for the last 6 years, leading one of the international programs of the social innovation network, Ashoka. Some of you may have encountered Ashoka. Before that, I was a legal and edutech entrepreneur in India, and I was trained as a lawyer. Seems like another life even before that. So I moved back to India to start HumLab last year. The idea behind HumLab is, so I'll just run through the presentation, but I'm really looking forward to the questions. Is really helping find, develop, and scale transformative ideas in legal industry, law, and justice. So really what we're trying to do at some level is to build an ecosystem. And whenever you sort of set something at that higher level, of course, definitions are hard to pin down. But I think a lot of my work is inspired by the fact that I've been on different sides of the fence, been an entrepreneur, been an investor, been a field catalyzer with Ashoka. So having been in these different places, there's that sense that, we can at least start to put an ecosystem in place which can ultimately find, develop, and scale transformative ideas in law and justice in the country. So I'll just share a glimpse with you, a glimpse of what HumLab is up to with you. So just one second. Yeah. So, obviously, in India, law, legal systems, and justice are ripe for disruptive approaches because they are failing in such an epic way, right? You talk about a country of 1.3 billion people, of which, and we can just share some stats that might be useful. You're talking about serving 1.3 billion people. You're talking about 500 million people in the cities, massive advent of mobile, a huge population of young people. And at the same time, you're talking about archaic processes of legal transactions, legal identity, legal literacy, dispute resolution. So naturally, there's a massive tension. And in that tension is this immense opportunity for impact. So that's what we're really excited about. We think that legal practice, legal industry, and justice delivery by 2025 will be vastly different, and that it's going to happen anyway, but an ecosystem could facilitate that, make that much more directional, make it much more big thinking, and ultimately ensure that things happen for the well-being of everyone and not just sporadically. So, what are these gaps that we're looking to address? We're looking at the entire range because we're not a single product or service. We're looking at how we can do more kind of field level stuff, right? So we're looking at justice delivery, dispute resolution, forms and transactions, legal education, legal service delivery, citizen engagement. So we're looking at a very wide range as we start, and then we'll identify areas where we want to dig in deeper. And the way we're approaching this right now is we're first focusing on a learning journey. So we're first trying to learn what's out there, and based on what we see in terms of the quality of ideas, the kind of new ventures, both on the market side, on the business side, as well as the social impact side, and of course, social enterprise in the middle, we're going to start to see what the next steps should be. So the first piece that we really want to invest in is the learning journey. And the way we've structured this learning journey is our first initiative, which is the Agami Prize. So we've brought together some of the most credible names in law and justice in the country. So Nilikini Philanthropies, which is one of the most credible philanthropies in the country, which is essentially the philanthropic arm of the founders of India's largest IT company, Infosys. Ashoka itself, Omidyar Network, which is very big and prominent in India, and of course you folks would know it as well in the Bay Area, and India's fastest growing law firm, Trilegal. So we brought them together, and they are the backers of this first national prize for legal industry, law and justice. And you can see why, a prize, because it's such an effective learning mechanism. At the same time, it's really a platform to bring different institutes, bring different stakeholders together. So our hope is that this prize, which is a rewarding on the market side, which is ventures which are transforming legal industry, citizenship, which is more focused on justice systems and social impact, as well as ideas at an early stage, but which could really be impactful. The concept is that, and I'll just skip past this one slightly over detailed slide, but the concept is that with this prize, by institutionalizing this national prize, we will build that body of knowledge, insights, as well as a really robust community of innovators, entrepreneurs, and catalysts and investors, to then design what the accelerative components of the ecosystem look like. If we were to say to legal tech ideas, for instance, that, we can offer a acceleration journey, then we'll be far better informed having gone through this prize process and seen the quality of ideas out there. So the first thing we're doing is this prize, which we've already launched and which actually closes next week. And then in Feb, we want to launch what we're calling the South by Southwest of legal and law and justice innovation in India. So that's going to be built off the knowledge of this annual prize. So that's just a brief glimpse of what HumLab is doing. But the idea is that we build this sort of three-pronged thing, which is very strong multidisciplinary community of innovators, entrepreneurs, investors, built off India-specific insight, what's relevant here. If you're talking about a solution inside an enterprise, what does it look like? Inside a firm, what does it look like? Consumer legal solutions, what do they look like? The third limb is the innovators and entrepreneurs themselves. And then, of course, ensuring that we're not siloed by having a strong global relationship to understand what's out there in the world, what could apply, what could others learn from what's happening in India. So that's just a brief glimpse of what we're up to. The timeline is we're just wrapping up the prize next year. Next month. It's a pretty significant endeavor, and lining up for HumLab 1, which is going to happen in February, which is that South by Southwest of law and justice that we're talking about. So I'll stop in case folks have questions. But these are the first steps of what we think over 5 to 10 years can be birthing a really robust ecosystem for India-specific innovations to thrive in law and justice.
Great. Well, any questions? So have you announced the price already, and people are submitting applications now, or what's?
Absolutely. And so we are in the last. We opened up July 10th.
Okay.
And the prize is closing on the 23rd of this month. So we are in the last week now of the prize, and then we announced. Yeah, the prize will be announced on the 4th of October. We've got a wonderful jury. So that will be 4th of October will be the announcement of the winners.
And can you share some of what kind of submissions you're seeing?
Absolutely. What we're thinking of doing is actually distilling what we've seen, converting that into a kind of a landscape sort of report, and then sharing that publicly. So I'll make sure that once we have a draft, I can share an early draft with the community.
Okay. All right. Any other questions?
Could people apply for this prize from non-India countries? I mean, if a student was at Stanford Law School, for example, and also what languages could be targeted? Could you target all 22 official languages in India, or English and Hindi, or what languages?
So for the first question is, right now, one of the criteria for the prize is that the venture must be either based in India in terms of its entity is in India, or substantial operations are in India. So that's one criteria that is there, that either substantial operations, marketing operations or technology operations or whatever, need to be in India, or straight up it's based in India, which of course excludes a whole bunch of people who are looking at India as a potential market, but are not necessarily sort of based in terms of their operations. To be really honest with you, the more I think about it, I think we need to think much deeper about this next year, because I think there's some learnings around why that criteria might be restrictive. But it is what it is this year. So that's, that has, of course, implications. To your second question, I think right now we're looking at just English and Hindi. India it's very treacherous when it comes to, sort of how do you deal with different languages. But if you look at the language of the courts, the language of most transactions, it's by and large English and Hindi. So we think it's pretty safe to go with English and Hindi.
All right. Okay, well, if there are no more questions, does anyone online have a question? You can use the chat function, or if you want us to hear you, have to unmute yourself.
I have one further question as we wait for possible online questions. Are most real estate transactions in all of the 22 languages and their related regions in India, are those real estate legal records in those 22 official languages? So is real estate mostly in much more than Hindi and English, but other aspects of the Indian law system are more Hindi and English centric?
Yeah, one of the big challenges that we're facing is that absolutely, especially with real estate, it's very local. You could, take for example, I'm in the middle of buying an apartment right now in Bangalore, and I'm looking at my own file, and it's got stuff in English, it's got stuff in Hindi, it's got stuff in the local Kannada language in Karnataka. I'm in Bangalore. And it's crazy, right? So the thing is that and of course it's not digitized. So it's extremely complex, but at the same time, the level of fudgery and fraud is so huge that it needs the kind of solution that people are talking about in terms of blockchain and stuff. So I think it's the pathway to getting this done to prevent the kind of immense amounts of fraud that is happening and securing people's rights still has to go through this immense body of highly local, non-digitized material.
All right, well, Sachin, thank you so much. And we look forward to getting an update from you once you have your winners, and also getting a sense from what kind of submissions you saw. I think that'd be really interesting to see what the legal innovation community in India is working on. I think that would be a really interesting data point for us. So very much appreciate it. I don't know what time is over there now, but it sounds like it's. Go ahead.
It's 2:20, but I think I'm going to stay on for a bit. I find the areas that people are working on very fascinating. So I will be on for a bit. But if you hear a sudden thump sound, that might be just me falling off the chair. So.
Okay, all right. Well, thanks again. Thank you for accommodating us in your night.
Huge pleasure.
And please stay on. And we'll turn it over to Jim now from Qualmet.
Yeah, let me get.
Jim, are you there?
Yes, sorry. I was my apologies. Yes. All right.
Where are you located?
I am in Louisville, Kentucky, home of the Kentucky Derby and Great Bourbon.
Nice.
All right.
I really appreciate people joining from, places from around the world. In Kentucky, the time is a little bit more.
Yeah, it's Eastern time, so 5 o'clock almost.
It's bourbon time.
Bourbon time. There's always
it's always bourbon time in Kentucky. All right. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, Jim, go ahead, please.
Okay. Well, let's jump in here. Well, thank you all. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you first and foremost. And I will tell you, I am a recovering lawyer. I am the CEO and co-founder of Qualmet, along with Mark Smolik, who is the general counsel of DHL Supply Chain Americas, based in Columbus, Ohio, and our friends at Next Law Ventures / Next Law Labs, who started Qualmet along with myself and Mark. So we are the three amigos. And we've been around for a little over 2 years now. We launched our platform just about a year ago and some change. And so I'm really excited to kind of talk about what we're trying to do in this space that I'll explain here in a sec. To tee it up, I'm going to show you our platform in a few. I've got a couple of slides to kind of square this thing up properly for the group, so you'll have an understanding of our vision and what we believe. Many of you all, obviously all of you all read all of the things I read, from the various trade journals and so forth. And so this swirl of we're not getting enough value from our law firms, right, continues to go up. Oh my gosh, we need more value. We need more value. And nobody really understand what that means, but there is clearly a drum beating around value. And so Altman does a survey every year that you all probably read, and they talk to chief legal officers at some of the biggest companies, and they ask them, okay, if we take out fees for a second, where do you all sit on how much value you're getting from law firms? And, it's overwhelming. We're just not getting enough. And so they went and asked the chairmen and chairpersons of these law firms kind of that same question. They said, well, what are you doing? Why aren't you doing more to drive value? Let me see here if I can advance my slide. There we go. And it's amazing what the answers were, right? So the first one's kind of obvious. They resist change. But the next one's rather interesting. Clients aren't asking for it. And so you go, wait a minute. The clients are actually complaining they're not getting enough value. But I think we all know kind of the non-confrontational nature of lawyers, and I'm one of them, but I am very confrontational, but I'm maybe an exception to the rule. This whole we're not feeling enough economic pressure, so I guess 2007-8 is not close enough to 2018. But then here's the next one, right? Most partners are unaware of what they might do differently. And I think that's fascinating. And so Qualmet's focusing on clients aren't asking for it and partners don't know what to do. And so if you step back and instead of kind of taking the traditional way of looking at let's solve a problem, what problem are you solving? So the problem would be corporate clients aren't getting enough value. We find that that's one that is kind of really nebulous. So I kind of flip it on its head and I go with, imagine a world where your law firms believe that their sole purpose is to exceed your expectations. And then here's the kicker. I really should have highlighted the next one, and excite you, right? And many people would chuckle. But if you think about it, it's kind of fascinating that this is one of the few industries I can really think about where the expectations are rather low. And so returning a phone call in 24 hours is kind of gets you excited. That's really, really kind of sad. And so this idea of creating a world in which law firms exceed expectations and excite their clients is one that we believe we can help shape. And kind of part and parcel to that, having sat in the in-house counsel chair for 4 years of my career at a big tobacco company that eats lawyers for lunch, this idea of being seen by the C-suite as a strategic business partner versus a lawyer is something that actually can happen. And it's really not about being a lawyer who's a great business person. It is really being a business person who just happens to be a lawyer. And so Qualmet is in the business of quantifying performance and value. So our platform is quantifying business and value around performance metrics to drive more business value to the legal industry, in particular to the companies in which we are working. But as we all know, when it comes to tech, it really starts with this idea of movement. And it's truly fascinating about how hard it is to move. But at the end of the day, we firmly believe that as our clients, customers, potentials really understand the power of feedback and the power of law firms and lawyers really thinking about how to exceed expectations by first understanding this movement to help them do that, the adoption will really start to pick up. Okay, does that make sense before I flip over to the demo?
All makes sense, yeah.
Okay. All right. So can you see a scatter plot?
Not yet. We have to go to share your screen and then change the app you're using.
Okay.
Now it's just sharing your PowerPoint.
All right, let's see here. All right, let me see how I can, I was just
there it is.
Super.
All right, there we go. All right. So this is our platform. It's cloud-based, and what you're looking at is the results of this fictitious company, Donna's Coffee Shop Press, up there in the left-hand corner, having just gone through a round of performance evaluations of their law firms and specifically the lawyers at those law firms down to the matter level, okay? And so you're looking at an aggregation of all of the reviews for these letters, which are law firms, and how they did against kind of two different data points. One, across the bottom, you're looking at their value score, and their value score for purposes of this report are 3 of the 20 questions that are part of the evaluation. Business satisfaction, right? Overall satisfaction, and we do a net promoter score. And so those 3 questions are indexed to give us a 0 through 100 score. We also interface with the company's matter management systems, and we pull the spend for the time period in which these matters and these lawyers are doing this work. So that's what you see on the north and south axis. And so what you're looking at is in the upper right-hand quadrant now is I'm the general counsel of Donna's Coffee Shop Press. I'm able to see after one round of evaluations how all my law firms in the eyes of my team are doing on these 3 value components and on spend. So this upper right-hand quadrant would be high spend, high value. And when we move over here, these are the folks that have a high wallet share of my annual spend, but also are lagging really behind, right? And as we move down a little more linearly, we're able to see the firms. These are all fictitious. Their spend, the number of evaluations. So again, these evaluations are at the lawyer level, and their overall Qualmet score, which is the 3 questions that I mentioned. Right?
And who writes those evaluations? What is that?
The in-house counsel.
Oh, okay.
The in-house counsel, okay? We pull the different practice areas that the legal department wants to use, right, where the matters fall. And then we also can take a look. I mentioned there are 20 questions. You see it jumped to this question at the outset of the project. Lawyer takes time to understand our objectives. That's the first question in the subset. There are the 20 questions. I'll do a really quick evaluation in just a sec. And you see it's adjusted. So now we're looking at how these law firms did and their lawyers did with respect to one question only, and that's, did they take time at the beginning of the project to really understand our objectives? Okay. When we peel back some layers of the onion, we see the data behind one firm in particular, okay? And you're able to see their value score, the number of persons in-house down the coffee shop who've done evaluations, the total number of evaluations, and the number of practice areas. The 20 questions that come with the platform are split into 5 categories: business relevance, results, service, appropriate effort, and resource management. The dark line shows you the range of all the different lawyers and law firms that were evaluated on the questions that fall under business relevance. The break in the line is the median score, and the circle is where this firm scored against all other firms. You see the highest scoring questions, the lowest scoring questions, and then remember, these are done at the lawyer level. So now we're able to see the highest and lowest scoring lawyers for this firm that does work for Donna's Coffee Shop Press. Okay, this summary is what our clients use to begin the conversation with their outside counsel. You can't improve, just like performance management that we've all been through, unless you absolutely know how they feel about your performance. Okay, so this is usually what they'll send to them to start a conversation, but the conversations tend to be face-to-face. When it comes to face-to-face, there's detail. So each of those 20 questions are flushed out, and we're able to see their scores. We're able to see the distribution of how the in-house team scores, a 1 to 5 on those various questions. And then at the very bottom, our last question is a net promoter score. Okay, that's the only 1 to 10 that we use on the survey and feedback. Okay, and then of course, since this is driven at the lawyer level, we're able to go to the respective lawyers, and very similarly to the aggregated firm score, we're able to look at an individual lawyer, get a quick summary of how they did, and then to really drive performance, we can get in specifics. Okay, so we can look at any one of these performance metrics, and if in this case it's Daniel, if Daniel has some opportunities, some gaps, it's going to show up here. And if the lawyers who were doing the evaluations had comments, they would populate under the questions. And so now we can get very specific. Okay. There's several different reports, but instead of jumping through those, I want to just show you how all this gets input. We can build an API, which none of our clients have asked us to do yet, since we've really just gotten going, but we'll take a CSV file from the matter management, and we'll preload the matters that each of the in-house lawyers is responsible for. So in this case, George Allen, Lord help us if he actually really had 36 evaluations to complete, but for purposes of the demo, we populated. You'll see the evaluations that he's already done, which ones are in progress and which ones have been completed. And then literally we'll go in and we'll start a new evaluation. Here are all the lawyers, outside counsel he's dealing with, and the matters. He'll pick one. Okay, it's all titled because it's been pulled directly from the matter management, and we'll start. Okay, and so I just wanted to quickly just show you a couple of these so you'll get an idea of the user interface. It's 1 to 5, 3 being meets expectations. That's where you want to see your lawyers. But as I talked about in my beginning slide, the idea is to build so we get to an exceeding expectations. There's only one question in the 20 question subset that deals with substantive law. Everything else is much more behavioral. Okay, and then you also see they have the ability to make comments. So we can select meets expectations, we can put a comment, and then when we put comments, those will show up under this question in the reporting function I just showed you. Okay, we have 3 questions in the subset that deal with fees or staffing, and so we understand that if in this case Michelle may be a 3rd-year associate, she may have nothing to do with the billing or staffing a matter, and so only for those 3 questions out of the 20 do we put an NA so that her score is not adversely impacted. Okay. Those 3 questions I mentioned that give you the Qualmet value score, this is one of them, delivering significant business value. So what you're already seeing is the conversation changing from what lawyers tend to focus on, which is the substantive piece of their work, and really understanding that the transformation on delivering value is far more about the delivery of legal services. And so this question around significant business value really allows the outside counsel and in some cases the in-house counsel, to have a conversation about, okay, we know you are a great, pick your substantive area, right? Environmental lawyer, but here's what's really happening in our business. And what should come from this question, if somebody's exceeding expectations, is what they're bringing to the table is not what you've asked me to do, but what you have not asked me to do that I understand, because I understand your business and I'm bringing it to you that makes you and your department better, which has a direct impact on Donna Coffee Shop Press's overall business. Okay, and the last one I'm going to show before I turn it over to questions is I mentioned only one of the 20 that come with the platform. We allow customization, but it does come with the 20, is really around substantive practice. And so clearly, if we're having this conversation, it's a very different conversation, but we are sensitive to the fact that there are numerous times where work is staffed by attorneys who maybe don't have the required legal expertise. But the crux of this platform is less on the substantive practice of law and far more on those things that really we have a hard time defining, that are called value, and then having conversations with them so that as we continue to have these evaluations over multiple time periods, we'll see the impact of the outside lawyers' performance moving up, not unlike an employee, and at some point really taking a deep dive and understanding and thinking about how we can deliver greater value to our client beyond just what we're supposed to do, which is be exceptional lawyers. So that's it. I'm looking at 15 minutes, so I'm going to be quiet and turn it over for questions.
What kind of in-house teams are you targeting? In particular, are you targeting SMEs or large corporates? Because I think at a certain size, if you get in the SME world, then they've got a lot of contact with all the lawyers personally. So who's your target client base?
Yeah. So if you asked me that question 2 years ago, I would say, the Fortune 500, and we want to have, they have the highest number. I think the Fortune 500 average around 147 law firms that they manage, right? We talked with one that was dealing with 400 law firms. And so that would have been my answer. But I'll tell you, this is really at the crux of, all of these things that we talk about are around behavior. But when you're talking about measuring performance, you really have to find the GCs, the chief legal officers, who also share that vision and really understand the kind of profound impact having these kind of conversations with their outside counsel. So I've really taken a step back to answer your question and really tried to focus on those lawyers, in-house lawyers and GCs. They tend to sometimes be new in their role, so they've inherited outside counsel, and their team goes, oh, they're great, and they really have no way of deciding if that's the case. They are forming new relationships with their CEOs and CFOs as part of the C-suite, and being able to substantively answer or show and demonstrate how they are measuring the performance of this outside counsel spend. Those tend to be the ones who gravitate more towards leveraging a platform such as this. We have a brand new $2 billion customer. They only have 5 people on their in-house team, but not only does she want to use this to start measuring her outside counsel as we work through a kind of a panel convergence process, but she wants to use the platform to have the business people measure her team. And then she also wants to have her final panel outside law firms measure their team as well to make sure that they're not serving as impediments. Those tend to be the ones. I love the big companies with hundreds and hundreds of lawyers, but quite frankly, what I've found over the last 2 years is it really boils down to the general counsel, who is far more anxious to really wrap their mind around kind of quantifying this and driving more value.
Are you selling services as well as SaaS?
Yeah, we almost have to, if you think about it. One day this will be something that's just kind of turnkey. I click on and I get going and I start evaluating, and all of my matters just flow right into my queue. But I was fortunate enough to work for 5 years at various consumer packaged good companies before I went to law school and then after law school. And so thinking that a lot of lawyers just get it is wrong. And so yes, we've had to be a little more hands-on. I'm actually helping this new client with her convergence, and then she wants to hire Qualmet post-convergence to not only help obviously administer the performance management side, which is this platform, but actually to spend some time interfacing with the law firms. And so I think, for the next year, we're going to find ourselves having to be a little more hands-on as part of our offering beyond just the SaaS side of it.
And how do you kind of scale your value orientation based on price? Like, because you can have a firm that costs $100 an hour versus one that costs $1,000 an hour. Is that part of your analysis?
So let me make sure I understand your question. Well, can you kind of rephrase the question? I want to make sure I understand it. When you're talking about scaling and then you pulled in outside law firms and their rates,
right. So if you have one lawyer that's being reviewed and they're sitting in in Bangalore doing work at a very cheap rate, you probably wouldn't expect as much of them in terms of your value analysis because the price is cheaper.
Yep. Got it.
But if you got somebody in New York you're paying $1,000 an hour for,
yep, and
might think differently.
Yep, no. Okay, I understand. Yeah, no. So that's what you saw at the beginning with the scatter plot was really just pulling in kind of the aggregated spend for a matter, right? Where the platform's evolving is to do exactly what you said, because at the end of the day, I want to compare apples to apples. So what will end up happening is we'll end up with some type of blended average rate based on these firms, so that what you're comparing is not so much the aggregated spend. You'll still be able to see that, but really, what kind of value am I getting for the team that's $150 an hour versus $1,500? And as you guys have read a lot recently about those kind of arguments, it's all feel. We're going to put the data behind it, and coming from an AmLaw 200 law firm. The partners at my firm used to, when I was chief business development officer, they used to complain about the fact that, we do just as good of work as Cravath and we're, $1,000 cheaper. And well, now we're going to be able to prove it, right? Or not.
Right. Sounds good.
Great question.
Yeah, this is Michael Shea from Morgan Lewis. I was wondering if you thought about opening the data up that you collect at a company to the law firms that are being ranked and rated, so that there was some transparency there back to the firm about their lawyers or just how they're doing in general. It could even be part of your business model to actually charge for that access to that data if the company allows you to do so.
Yeah, no, you're spot on, and only because of time I didn't want to go through every kind of thing that we're thinking. So the idea is exactly that. I mean, look, if you think about it like a sales team, if there's no transparency, then there's no real pressure to get better, even if you have a one-to-one conversation. So the longer term power of this, Michael, is exactly what you said. The idea is to make it completely transparent. Mark Smolik in Columbus, he literally sits down with his law firms and he does not anonymize any of the names of the law firms. He shows them exactly where they sit against their competitors. And so my view is if law firms want to sit around and just kind of not necessarily proactively engage in this, and then yes, access to a larger database will be there. But I will tell you, I have a law firm now, one of the AmLaw 200, who has approached us and said, hey, we'd like to give this to our customers. How much would it cost for us to just buy the damn thing from you and give it to our customers and tell them we're going to be transparent, beat us up, we want to get better, and then you can use it to evaluate all your law firms. And so I see it happening in both ways, law firms becoming direct customers that way, but also non-Qualmet, quote unquote, customers with the platform being able to subscribe to have access to their overall data set for not just their own clients, but really to see other clients.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, great question.
Have you have any documented evidence of being able to move legal spend from one firm to another based on poor performance scores?
Yeah, we're really early on that yet. So most of our customers have just completed one cycle. It is but I will tell you, one in particular, they were quite surprised before they did the evaluation. I remember two of the young ladies talking about how a certain law firm, they had to be used because they were so large and had incredible expertise. And then after they did the evaluations, they were the most expensive law firm had the highest amount of their wallet share, right, and were their lowest performing of all of the big ones, and so they kind of gasped. So I'm not sitting in the room with them right now, but maybe in 6 months, if you want to come give me a call, I'll let you know how that worked out.
And do you read Mark Cohen's blog, The Legal Mosaic?
I do.
Yeah, there's some. You can get some great terrorist quotes from that to drive adoption.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Mark. I've reached out to him before. I'll just tell you, and I know we're going long on time, so I appreciate it. And these are great questions. I mean, my view is simply, we've spoken to some of the biggest companies in the world since we launched our commercial release, and they all go, yeah, this makes sense. They struggle with how to actually not so much put it in the system, because it's cloud-based. It's very simple, as you can see, but actually to have a discussion with their outside counsel around these kind of things. But this is going to be a way of life, and I'll tell you, the young lady who's the new GC at the company I mentioned that we just brought on, she's absolutely going to be probably one of our strongest use cases for seeing law firms really start to behave quite differently, and ultimately having an impact on not just their spend, but on the kind of things that law firms produce and are going to have to be thinking about very differently than what we see in 2018. So it's going to be very, very exciting. The industry is buzzing about driving more value, and we're just going to quantify it and push it a little harder through transparency, like Michael raised earlier.
Okay. Great. So other questions or? All right. So I think, well, great. Why don't we give Jim a round of applause? That was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoyed.
And next we're going to have Jack Chu from Patent Pal. So we'll go ahead and get those slides up.
Great. So thanks for having me here. So a little bit about my background. I studied cognitive systems, so a mix of artificial intelligence and computer science in my undergrad. Went to Harvard Law School, focusing mostly on intellectual property law. I have been practicing for 2.5 years, both on patent litigation and patent prosecution, and have started this company to try to automate certain aspects of the patent drafting process to make the work of patent attorneys a little bit more efficient and easier. I worked with a variety of different clients, including big institutional clients like Microsoft, Oracle, Facebook, but also a variety of startup clients. And oftentimes when I work with startup clients, they have a lot of questions for me about just what this whole process looks like, what is the value of patents. So to give a little bit of background for those less familiar with patents, I'll kind of go over in broad strokes patent pipeline. So the patenting process starts with an inventor with an idea. So let's say you invented the next state-of-the-art machine learning systems for predicting crypto market prices or something. So you have this idea, and then you bring it to a patent attorney, who then spend typically about anywhere between 30 hours, 40 hours, 50 hours to draft the patent application. And then you take that patent application gets filed with the U.S. Patent Office, typically out in Washington, D.C. And over the course of a 2 to 3 year process, typically you'll get a lot of back and forth to argue just what the scope of your invention is and how you can get it allowed with the patent office, which ultimately, hopefully, leads to approval of the patent. So having this patent that's now approved, you have this legal document that's your intellectual property. What can you do with it? So there's 4 main ways in which a patent brings value to a company. First of all, for most startups, they're using the patent for defensive purposes. They want to just describe what they built, what they invented, in order to protect their technology. Patents can also be used offensively in litigation to assert their technology and use as a competitive advantage to prevent other entities from encroaching on their space or to get damages. Often you hear about these big litigations that goes for tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars. On top of that, patents can also be used as a valuation tool. So for a new startup, they may have they may just have starting out with a small team, so they have human capital. They may also have raised some money, so they have financial capital. But a big part of what makes up the value of a startup, of a new company, is their intellectual property, is their ideas, is their expertise, is their invention, and that gets transformed into a legal document that's put into more tangible form. And then finally, another major way to monetize the IP is through licensing. So you have the patent, you can sell it to other companies, or you can license to another company for royalties. So given like all of these four major ways of monetizing patents, so we know like patents have value for startups. Nevertheless, like a lot of new companies are not getting patents because either it's because it's cost prohibitive, they're not very clear on what the value proposition is of patents, or because the whole process is a little bit too complex. So looking at this pipeline, I see like three major opportunities. Like one is on the patent drafting side, which for often typically costs around like $15,000 to get a patent drafted and filed. But also on the patent prosecution side, where it takes about 2 to 3 years, like it's the most time-consuming process from getting the idea all the way to getting that patent finally approved. And also on the monetization side, so like creating a marketplace where it's easier for people with patents to find buyers and sellers. For me, given my expertise in drafting patents, that's where I want to start focusing my business. So that's where PatentPal comes in. That's where I want to target. So how does a patent get drafted? So it starts with the lawyer will get invention disclosure documents, oftentimes about 3 pages of like what the inventor has invented. He wrote it up. There may be some figures involved. So the lawyer reviews that. Then the lawyer will have a meeting typically for about 1 hour with an inventor. And from those 3 pages and 1 hour, that gets turned into the patent draft, which often can be like an 8-page document. So the lawyer would begin by drafting the claims, which outlines the scope of the invention, the figures, and perhaps even an outline of the full document that they want to continue drafting, and then proceeds to write the rest of the specification, including the abstract, summary, description of the figures, and the detailed description of all of the different ways that the invention can be implemented. So given sort of like this picture of how the patent gets drafted, where the bottleneck is mostly on drafting the specification. So like drafting the claims takes maybe 8 hours. Drafting the figures maybe takes another 8 hours, and sometimes if the figures are provided, it will take less time. But the bulk of the time is spent on actually drafting that 80, 100 pages of technical description. And that can be quite a mechanical process. Once you have the claims, that already outlines this invention, but one of the key legal requirements is to be able to enable your technology. So what a lawyer often does is that he goes through all of the different ways that an invention can be built using existing technology. So that requires a lot of descriptions of the foundational technology, background technology, and new ways in which the technology can be used to implement the invention. So that's where I think there is a lot of opportunity to take the input that the lawyer has already generated, the claims and the figures, and be able to automate some of the process of turning those inputs into bodies in the specification. So on the left hand here, it's sort of like in very rough terms, like what a patent application looks like in the different sections. So the goal is to take apart the patent application and really analyze each section and see how each section can be handled and generated using machine learning. So here's an example focusing on the abstract section here. Here's an example of what I'm able to generate just using rule-based programming. So on the left-hand side is an example of what the attorney actually filed with Patent Office. And on the right-hand side is what I'm able to generate simply based on the set of claims that attorneys have provided. So the yellow I've highlighted are the differences between the most of the differences between the two sections, and for the most part, like they're pretty much talking about the same thing. Some of the differences may include like using passive tense versus active tense, or like using may language versus can language. So like there's stylistic differences between like how attorney may want to write versus what a machine can generate. And a similar story when it comes to generating a brief summary section. Like again, like the attorney may write like in various embodiments, whereas like in my code may write like in one embodiment, the invention may provide this and that. So these are sort of like the first stages, like the low-hanging fruit of what you can automate. But I want to further go beyond that, and this is sort of like a picture I want to create of not only having the human lawyer draft the specification, but first going through a filter of using the Patent Pal software to generate a draft that gets you pretty much 70%, 80% there, which then the lawyer can review and turn that into a final draft. And through this process, generate user data that can further inform the machine learning software on how they can update their models, and also contributing to the database of all the prior patents. So combining the user input from the lawyer and also the database of all of the published patents, both by the firm using the software and also in the public domain. Ultimately, I like to create something like a recommender system where it first gives you a patent draft, mostly in good form, and then for each section that while you're reviewing the draft, for each section that you don't like, you can go through alternative suggested language and pick and match the ones that you like. And often this is kind of a key differentiator between an attorney that's more experienced versus an attorney that's new. For a new attorney who hasn't drafted as many patents, they wouldn't have as much of a body of their own work to pull from. Whereas a more experienced attorney can mix and match, copy and paste like previously drafted descriptions of foundational technology and incorporate that into new patents that they're drafting. So overall, I do think there is a lot of opportunity in this space. Right now, patent filings is still mostly done by large entities. I believe there's a pretty large segment of the market that's still uncaptured. The companies or the solo inventors that want to file patents but find it too cost prohibitive or find the journey too complex to navigate. And in the US, the patent industry has been growing steadily, but this is showing the US data, but overall worldwide, in countries such as China, the number of patent filings has exceeded the US, and now it's almost double that of the US. So where labor costs are much cheaper, you're definitely seeing more of the market participating in this activity. So to the extent that we can make this process more efficient and have attorneys focus on more higher margin work, we can hope to capture more of the market and make the U.S. innovation market more active. So I really appreciate your feedback on this.
So who's your target market for this? Is it, you mentioned small people who can't afford lawyers, but then you also mentioned the large corporates doing in-house filings. Is it in-house teams doing filings, or is it inventors and sort of small filers?
Right. My chief target market is going to be law firms and also in-house teams. And once the tool can be more robust, that can be used by someone less familiar with drafting patents, then it can also be given to solo inventors and non-lawyers.
What's the incentive for the lawyer in a law firm to do it?
Right. So with something like contract law, like lawyers bill by the hour, but with something like patents, to a very large extent, law firms, especially with their large, high volume institution clients, bill at a fixed fee. So for every hour that can be saved using software, it's value that's directly adding to the law firm's bottom line.
So there are a number of companies trying to do the same thing. How do you differentiate yourself?
Sure. I mean, I don't want to comment too much on competitor companies. I think right now this space is quite new. I think there's a lot of problems that need to be solved, and for anyone who is able to solve them, I think they deserve a good chunk of the market share. But I think, to my understanding, a lot of the similar companies out there right now are targeting towards building tech-enabled law firms, where what Patent Pal is trying to do is to build software that can better enable all of the law firms in the market.
Who owns the data when they've input it? How does that work? It's confidential.
Right.
Is it owned by Patent Pal? Is it owned by the law firms? And how do you separate it?
Right. So I mean, there's a large body of publicly available data. That's all of the patents that had been published by the U.S. Patent Office.
Right.
And the U.S. Patent Office makes that available to entrepreneurs to be able to use that and innovate on top of that. But for firms who are seeking to gain a competitive advantage, they want to be able to better leverage their own data as well. So for the 2 or 3 years, for like the 18-month period that the patent doesn't get published, the firm has exclusive access to their own internal databases. And so within firms, it's actually pretty common practice for lawyers to borrow language from one patent they've drafted previously to a new patent. So by being able to provide this platform to them so that they can access their own data, then they're able to make better use of it. So to answer your question, I like to keep the data in control by the firms themselves. It's important to protect that kind of confidentiality. To the extent that I can use like certain metadata that's outside of like what's confidential, like I can use that to improve my software.
But how do you do the machine learning if you can't pool the data?
Right. I mean, like for companies like LexisNexis, right? So, like they're improving their systems based on the data that their users are using. At the same time, they have provisions that respect the user's confidentiality.
I was surprised and interested to hear that you said China was producing double the number of patents as the U.S. I had understood from, I think, May Getchlik herself, that the director of the Stanford Law China Guiding Cases Project, that in the 87, last time I checked, Beijing Supreme Court ruling since 2011, patenting wasn't allowed in China because of the legacy of the political system being communist. And that was an interesting relationship between Stanford Law and potentially the Beijing Supreme Court. So I'm curious, with your having gone to college in Canada and Harvard Law School and being a licensed lawyer in California, how you might expand the sort of patenting focus maybe beyond the US of your very interesting software and focus on drafting to potentially China. That's the first question. Second question has to do with a very big vision of a realistic virtual Earth. Think Google Street View with time slider maps Earth for drafting. So inventors from all 200 countries could potentially draft their remarkable innovations at the cellular and atomic levels too. And over on the left of the screen could be the drafting tools, the write-ups, and Google Translate. So this would be conceptually Google Translate, Google Street View with time slider, Google Earth, TensorFlow. So there would be the machine learning and AI software, Google Translate, and the drafting technology would be over to the left. You know, for the write-ups and the comparisons of, you know, abstract versus description. Where are you going with China, and to what degree would that be a use? The second question: to what degree would a realistic virtual Earth for drafting be helpful for Patent Pal, and not only in the U.S.?
Those are very interesting questions. Thank you for that. I currently don't have a lot of plans to expand into China. My main focus is still in the US, certainly helping Chinese companies as well to be able to file their patents in the US. But I can imagine it can be quite challenging to expand overseas and be mindful of the local rules there and working with partners there to localize the product. But that might be something I explore more intensely down the road. And any kind of tools that helps with like visualizing intellectual property and visualizing like translating input and output into patents, be able to not only see the output but also see like how it got there, would help build trust with the platform and help, you know, lawyers be able to use the technology better. So, thank you for that.
Well, I think we are just about at time, so we can go ahead and thank Jack. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Codex meetings will resume sort of in the mid-September timeframe, so stay tuned to your email. We'll be sending out announcements, and I hope everybody enjoys the remainder of their summer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to you.
So how far along are you? How many people are working at your company?
Right now, it's just myself.
There you are.
Yeah, so.
You're the